الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربنا وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والتفنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. Okay, let's start with his and we can keep going on and on about the 2 points we have been discussing. And let's move on to Allama Iqbal's critique of Einstein's theory of relativity. Looking, however, the theory from the standpoint that I have taken in these lectures, Einstein's relativity presents the one great difficulty, that is the unreality of time. Okay, two things about these. So Iqbal uses the phrase unreality of time. And the thing we have said about his use of reality applies here as well. It's not clear whether unreality, depending on what he means by reality here, it can be contrasted with ideals. So does theory of relativity, according to Iqbal, claim that time is ideal? And obviously unreality can be reality can be contrasted with subjectivity. Something subjective is not real in objective sense. So here reality would be meant as objective. And obviously reality is also contrasted with unreal in the sense that it doesn't exist. So does Iqbal claim that relativity claim or relativity implies non-existence of time? So we have to clarify these points before we can make any assessment or judgment on Allama Iqbal's claims about or his critique of the theory of relativity as far as the concept of time is concerned. Now, the concept of time is very important in Iqbal in these lectures, as well as in his poetry, because movement in the physical and social sense is very important for Iqbal. And that should be understood at least partially in the context of imperialism and struggles against imperialism. Motion, movement, a dynamic conception of reality, as well as a dynamic conception of life. It's biological as well as civilizational concept is very important for Iqbal. And he thinks that in order to adhere to a dynamic conception of life, you have to believe that movement is real and time is real. That's why he's very much against philosophies which he thinks are static, motionless, non-dynamic philosophies and ways of life. And his critique of tasawwuf, for example, and what he terms as Ajami or non-Arabic influences in Islam, stems from partially then his view that they were undynamic views of life, etc. And his conception of jihad, jihad is zindagani. Jihad is zindagani, the jihad of life, struggle within life for something higher, nobler. Stems from his dynamic conception of life. And he thinks that that's what Islam teaches us, etc. And he thinks that if space is not real, for example, or that's why he spends so much time on Zeno's paradoxes, not just as a philosophical riddle, but also because if space is not real, then motion is not real. If time is not real, then motion is not real. We're not going anywhere. Progress is important for him, not just material progress, but biological progress as well as spiritual progress, etc. And that are they're all part of his dynamic conception of life, which he thinks that Islam is. So that's important to keep in mind when we are thinking about these issues. Going back to the text, okay, looking however at theory from the standpoint, and he's talking here about theory of relativity, from the standpoint that I have taken in these lectures, Einstein's relativity presents the great difficulty, that is the unreality of time. It takes time to be a kind of fourth dimension of space. Must, it seems, regard the future as something already given. That's another thing. As indubitably fixed as the past. So time as a the specific time of the free creative movement. Okay, let's first talk a bit about whether time is unreal uh, relativity. Now, when we are talking about unreality of time, on the face of it, and obviously remember unreality, the use of term is ambiguous at least. Because it at least have three meanings. So that's not clear. On the face of it, it seems absurd to say that time is unreal for the theory of relativity. We can say that it has a specific conception of time in its framework, which to start with doesn't mean that it is a universal conception. And to start with, moreover, yeah, so he's not talking about the time that the conception of time used in theory of relativity exhausts all the conceptions of time. So he's talking about conception of time which is relevant to his theory. That's important. But in that context, it seems wrong to say that time is unreal. At least in the sense that it doesn't exist as a separate or at least distinct reality. The fact that it has relationship with matter, observer, also space in that way, doesn't mean it is unreal, doesn't exist. It means that there's no absolute time, for example. In the context of theory of relativity. I'm not entirely sure about this point because I'm not a physicist, but philosophically, I don't see any contradiction in saying that, at least not immediately, that Einstein might concede that there might be absolute conception of time in some other context. For example, in philosophical context. For example, if you're a Kantian, you believe in absolute time, but your time is unreal in the sense that it is subjective, although subjectivity is a higher subjectivity, not just individualistic subjectivity. Okay, so what was I saying? And time for relativity theory is relative to observers' frame of reference. And it is connected to, related to concept like speed and gravity, for example. Now, if you want to say that time is unreal for Einstein, because it's not a self-sufficient reality, then that might be true, at least in the context of this theory of relativity. For example, we can raise the question whether time or space can exist without matter, for example, for Einstein. Or speed or gravity can exist without matter, for example. In that sense, everything else is unreal. But that's not what we mean by unreal. At least it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Nobody says that gravity doesn't exist. Just because gravity is dependent on matter doesn't mean that it is unreal. Similarly, even if we believe that space and time are a function of matter, doesn't mean that they are unreal. But they might be unreal in some sense. That's why it's important to clarify the meaning of unreal. He's saying relativity presents a great difficulty, that is, the unreality to a theory which takes time to a kind of fourth dimension of space. Must, it seems, is not sure. I regard the future as something already given. I think his main concern is this thing. And we'll discuss that in the next slide. What is the thing? And I think that has nothing to do with relativity as such. A theory which takes time to be a kind of fourth dimension of space must, it seems, regard the future of something already given as indubitably fixed. So that obviously, if everything is fixed, it is unacceptable for Iqbal, because then you won't have any conception of creativity. For him, creativity is, something very important. And if everything is already given, then there is no creation. Creation is something out of nothing, I guess. But we'll talk about that in the next session, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu وصلي وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين.